Well, thank you all so much for joining us for Armchair Travel to Switzerland, Historic Cities and Alpine Vistas. Walk through the medieval yet modern lakeside cities of Zurich and Lucerne and along the cobbled streets and ancient arcades of the World Heritage City of Bern. Take the rapid train to, oh boy, Lauterbrunnen Valley with its soaring rock faces and thundering waterfalls. From there, travel along the Matterhorn Gotthard Bahn to Zermatt, and ride the world's highest gondola to Klein Matterhorn. Finally, hop on the Golden Pass Express for a scenic trip along the shores of Lake Geneva. That I got it. I think I got that one right. So this is led by Alison, Simcox, and Douglas Heath. Alison is an environmental specialist, local historian, and an author. She works at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, specializing in air quality. Doug is a hydrogeologist and a local historian who formerly worked at the EPA, and he specialized in drinking water in New England. And they have co-authored 5 books on the history of Boston's North Shore, as well as 2 trail guides. So I again want to thank the Friends of the Tewksbury Library for sponsoring. There's a list of libraries that helped promote today's program, which I will thank in the chat and in the follow-up email. But all 250 plus of us who are watching live, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Alison and Doug for joining us this afternoon. And Alison and Doug, you can finally take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. So we thank you, Robert, and the Tewksbury Library for giving us this opportunity. Today, we will give you a tour around one of the world's most beautiful countries, a country best known for its mountains, charming villages, and historic cities. And from a practical point of view, there is the famous Swiss efficiency and quality, so you can expect on-time trains, clean hotels, and excellent food. We traveled in October of last year. The map on the left shows our itinerary. We began in Zurich in the north and made our way southwest to Lucerne and Bern, and then we turned south into the heart of the Alps, with stops in Lauterbrunnen and Zermatt, and finally headed northwest for a quick trip along the shores of Lake Geneva. Switzerland is situated between Germany, Austria, France, and Italy. It has 4 official languages: German, French, Italian, and Romanesque, with English as a contender for recognition as a 5th language. Swiss German is a dialect of German, and as some might be surprised to learn, it is not a written language. Romanesque is unique to Switzerland and develops from the Latin spoken by the Roman soldiers who lived in the region during the Roman Empire. It is only spoken in southeastern Switzerland. And as shown on the map on the right, Switzerland is divided into 3 geographic regions: the Jura, that's the pale green region in the northwest, the Central Plateau, or the Mittelland, and the Swiss Alps. October is an ideal month to travel to Switzerland because the summer tourist season is over and the winter skiing season hasn't begun. Before departing, we bought 10-day Swiss travel passes, which gave us freedom to take unlimited train rides without reservations. We highly recommend these. We flew from Boston to Zurich via Swiss Air, and they even served dinner. At the right is a view of the city looking south towards Lake Zurich. The city spans both sides of the Zermatt River. In this photo, you can see 3 of Zurich's main churches that we visited: the 2-towered Grossmünster on the left, and on the right, the Fraumünster with its distinctive green steeple, and St. Peterskirche in the foreground with its large clock face. From the airport, we took a train to downtown Zurich. We soon arrived at Zurich's Hauptbahnhof, the largest train station in Switzerland and one of the busiest in Europe. As we hurried along the station's main concourse, past food markets and cafes, restaurants, and gift shops, we remembered to look for the famous guardian angel hanging from the rafters. This polyester sculpture was made in 1997 by French artist Nicky de Saint-Phal to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Swiss Airways. The voluptuous angel with golden wings is said to watch over travelers. Zurich's train station was built in 1847, and it was extended in 1871 with its main entrance rebuilt in the style of a triumphal arch. In 1889, Swiss sculptor Richard Kissling created a bronze statue of Alfred S. Escher, a Swiss politician and entrepreneur who founded banks and insurance companies in Switzerland, as well as the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology.
We walked south along Zurich's famous shopping boulevard, the Bahnhofstrasse, which stretches between the train station and Lake Zurich. This street's history began in 1864 when the city's fortifications were raised and the ditch in front of the walls was filled in. Today, the boulevard is filled with pedestrians and street trolleys and is one of the most expensive streets for retail property worldwide. We passed fancy boutiques and many watch shops and stopped at Pestalozzi Square, one of the few green spots along the boulevard. This park is named after Johann Pestalozzi, who was an early 19th century education reformer in the style of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Pestalozzi advocated sending all children to school, regardless of whether they were rich or poor, boys or girls. Here I am at a fountain at the corner of the park. Fountains like this were used for public drinking water supplies. What better way to see the city than from a boat? We took this one on the Limmat River to Lake Zurich. The boats are built to just fit under the low bridges. We also passed under the Rathausbrücke, or Town Hall Bridge, which is called Zurich's ugliest bridge. Built in 1972, locals call it also the Vegetable Bridge because of the market that was once on top of it. It was slated to be demolished in 2022, but as you can see, it still stands. After our boat ride, we walked to the Grossmünster Church on the east side of the river. This is the largest church in Zurich and the city's landmark. According to legend, Charlemagne discovered the graves of the city's patron saints, Felix and Regula, at this spot, and so ordered that a monastery be built. The present church dates in the beginning of the 12th century. Recent archaeological finds have confirmed that a Roman burial ground exists at the site. In the first half of the 16th century, the Grossmünster was the starting point of the Swiss-German Reformation. Upon entering, we bought tickets to climb up one of its towers. The picture on the right was taken from one of its towers, from which we had wonderful views across the city.
From this wonderful height, we then went down into the crypt. We came upon this 15th century statue of Charlemagne, which used to sit atop the South Tower, but today a replica of this statue is on the tower instead. We then crossed back over to the west side of the river to visit St. Peter's Kirche. This church is located next to Lindenhof Hill, site that was the site of a Roman castle. In 1706, St. Peter's Kirche was consecrated as the first church under Protestant rule. The steeple's clock face has a diameter of 28 feet, making it the largest church face in Europe, even bigger than Big Ben. Below Lindenhof Hill is one of the oldest areas of the city. This district is called Schimpfe, from the nautical term Schimpfen, used by fishermen in the Middle Ages to describe how they pushed their boats to and fro from the riverbank to deliver silk, gold, and food. Today, it is an area of restaurants and shops where you can buy custom-made products. Here's one of the area's more picturesque streets. The next church we visited was back on the west side of the river. This church, the Fraumunster, meaning woman's church, with its green steeple, is located on the site of a first-century convent. The current church dates from 1250. The big draw to this church is its 5 Marc Chagall windows. This interior shot is looking towards the entrance of the church. And when you turn to the other side, you will see these 5 windows behind the altar. In 1960, Zurich officials began a search for an artist to create stained glass windows for the Fraumunster. Then in 1967, Zurich hosted a Chagall exhibit that caught the attention of the Fraumunster pastor. He was impressed by Chagall's Cubist painting style, which featured simple figures and bright colors. And so the pastor offered the 80-year-old Chagall the stained glass commission. For the next 3 years, Chagall put all his efforts into the project. He sketched the design of each window from his home on the French Riviera and spent many weeks in Zurich supervising installation. The images symbolize God's creation and include the story of Moses and the 10 Commandments, Jacob on his ladder, the end of days showing an angel blowing a trumpet, and Jesus on the cross.
As well as the stained glass, the Fraumunster has art depicting scenes from an 8th century legend that is famous in Zurich. According to this legend, the 2 daughters of King Ludwig of Germany, Hildegard and Bertha, lived in a fortress in the mountains above the city. Each evening, a deer with lighted horns would lead them to the dark forest and down the hill to the edge of the river. There, the sisters would pray, and after praying, the deer would lead them home. The Fraumunster is said to have been built on the spot where the sisters prayed. Back outside, we were tempted by one of the many bakeries, or Konditorei in Zurich. Rather than eat pastries for dinner, we headed to one of the city's co-ops, like this one that was in the train station, where we bought ready-prepared meals and wine. Buying food at co-ops in Switzerland is far cheaper than always eating in restaurants, and co-op food is quite good. The next day, we boarded a cog railway to Uetliberg Mountain, which rises west above the city, above Lake Zurich. This is the mountain featured in the story of Hildegard and Bertha and the deer. We hiked up the path to the summit. Fittingly, in honor of the legend, the path is lined with many statues of deer with lamps in their horns, like the one shown here on the right. These were sculpted by the sculptor Gunnar Weber. At the top, we climbed the high lookout tower, and despite the cool wind, enjoyed the expansive views across the valley and the city of Zurich below. Next on our itinerary was the Swiss National Museum. This is a real must attraction for anybody visiting the city. It was built in 1898 in the style of a chateau with many towers and courtyards. The museum tells more about Swiss history than the average tourist probably wants to know. From Roman rule in the 1st century BC, the country's incorporation in the Frankish Empire in the 6th century, through its wars of independence and the Swiss Reformation, and internal strife within the original 13 cantons. During the Napoleonic era, Switzerland became an official confederation. In 1848, a federal constitution was established. Since then, the story of Switzerland has largely been one of success and prosperity, especially due to its neutrality during wars and the success of its banking industry. One of the museum's highlights is its section on Gothic art and chivalry, with panel paintings and tapestries. An excellent example is shown in this slide. This tapestry was made in Paris in the early 18th century. This shows the signing of a business alliance in 1663 between the Swiss Confederation and King Louis XIV at Notre Dame in Paris. The museum includes rooms that show how people lived in the 15th to 17th centuries. For example, here is the elegant Seidenhof room from the Werdmüller house. One of the richest families in Zurich, the Werdmüllers were a textile merchant. The room includes its original 17th century tiled wood-burning stove. Tile making has a long history in Switzerland, and we can go on for an hour on the history of tiles. One of the most important artifacts of Swiss cultural history is a 16th century globe called the St. Gallen globe. This came from the Abbey of St. Gall in northeastern Switzerland. It is made of wood, paper, mache, and combines terrestrial and celestial globes. And of course, the museum wouldn't be complete without a collection of sleighs. In the 17th and 18th centuries, sleighs were a symbol of status, and rides were mostly enjoyed by the wealthy. The sleighs were lavish and colorful, as shown here, ornamented with mythological figures and family insignia.
Topping off our trip in Zurich was a visit to Linz's chocolate factory on the shores of Lake Zurich. We took a commuter boat, walked a short distance along the shore, and found ourselves in a chocolate paradise, complete with this tall column of liquid chocolate. The exhibit space was huge and includes a recreation of a jungle in Ghana in West Africa, with farmers picking and drying beans from the cocoa trees and then roasting them in preparation for the refining process. Finally, they grind beans into a coarse powder and blend that with other ingredients to make liquid chocolate. Of course, all the farmers looked very happy in the videos, and so they would like us to believe. The best part of the tour was the sampling room, where you can sample as much dark milk and white chocolate as you want. Many people, including us, put an ample supply in our backpacks to enjoy later. And then after a whirlwind tour of Zurich, we took a short train ride to Lucerne. The city's modern train station lies behind a 19th century facade shown in the lower left of this slide. The facade is all that is left of the old station after an unfortunate fire in 1971. Oops, sorry. As you can see at the lower right, Lucerne's setting is similar to Zurich's. It also lies along a river at the western end of a large lake. However, Lucerne has distinctly higher mountains nearby. We stayed in this hotel in the city's old section, and this is a view from our room. We were surprised to learn that this hotel first opened nearly 500 years ago. Although the location appeared ideal, we soon discovered that a nearby church rang a bell every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day. And so we fished earplugs out of our bags. Before our trip, we had made reservations for a walking tour of the city. We made our way to the meeting place besides the Reuss River in front of the huge Lucerne Culture and Convention Center. This center includes a theater, art museum, cafes, and a plaza covered by an extensive metal roof. Although apparently it is a popular venue, we thought it was too modern and too large for the waterfront. But then nobody asked us before they built it. The highlight of the walking tour was the 14th century Keppelbrück, or Chapel Bridge, that spans the river diagonally. The bridge was originally part of the city fortifications. It is the oldest covered wooden footbridge in Europe and the symbol of Lucerne. Next to the bridge is the octagonal Wasserturm, or water tower, built in 1300 that has served as a lighthouse, prison, and treasury over the years. The bridge is unique in containing many 17th century wood panel paintings of events from Lucerne's history. Some are shown here. However, a fire in 1993 destroyed the center portion of the bridge, as well as many of these paintings. The cause of the fire is unknown, but it is thought to have started on a boat beneath the bridge by a discarded cigarette. 2/3 of the original 158 paintings were lost, and only 30 have been fully restored. However, the ones that were charred remain, and despite this, the restoration is impressive. The level of Lake Lucerne has been controlled since 1861 by this weir on the Reuss River. The weir was extended and renovated in 2011, and part of it is still operated by hand. The settings of the needles, the wooden slats shown here, determines the flow over the weir.
That evening, we took a walk along the river. Here is one of the many decorated tile houses in the city. The Jesuitenkirche is a Catholic church built in honor of Saint Xavier. It is the first large Baroque church built in Switzerland north of the Alps. The interior, as you can see here, is richly decorated with intricate stucco work and beautiful ceiling paintings depicting the life of Saint Xavier. In the chapel shown on the right, a statue of Nicholas of Flue, who is also called locally as Brother Klaus, is clothed with his original 15th century vestments. Brother Klaus was a farmer, military leader, and mystic, and is the patron saint of Switzerland. The next day, we headed to the Rosengart Gallery of Modern Art, which is famous for its paintings by Paul Klee and Pablo Picasso. It also has works by artists such as Cézanne, Monet, Matisse, Kandinsky, and Chagall. This slide shows some works from their Picasso collection. We also took a boat ride to Mount Pilatus, which rises 7,000 feet above Lake Lucerne. It was a beautiful day, so we were in luck. After an enjoyable boat ride, we got off at the terminus of a cog railway, the steepest in Europe, with a gradient of up to 48 degrees. The 3-mile-long cog railway was completed in 1889, and it is the first railway to be powered by coal, as shown in this historic photo on the right. The line was electrified in 1937. Once at the top, you're rewarded with magnificent views of Lake Lucerne and the surrounding Alps. The name Mount Pilatus comes from the Latin word pilatus, meaning cloud-covered. But fortunately, we had mostly clear skies and warm weather. Besides views like this, the summit has 2 hotels and a restaurant. The mountain became famous in the 19th century when the German composer Richard Wagner raved about its vistas, and Queen Victoria actually rode to the summit on horseback. On the right are men playing the alp horn. These instruments were traditionally made of 1 or 2 pieces of wood from a red pine tree. Alp horns were used by mountain dwellers in the Alps for communication, but are now used as musical instruments and are popular with tourists. The little-known fact is that the Swiss built about 20,000 bunkers and anti-aircraft positions underground and in mountainsides as a defense against the Third Reich. Also, nearly every house is a fallout shelter, and every man is considered part of the National Guard. So although Switzerland is neutral, it was and still is ready to defend itself. Because of Mount Pilatus' commanding position, tunnels with lookouts were bored all the way around the mountain. Today, they make for a fun tour while protecting you from the weather. That's me walking through one of the tunnels. Here is a view of Lake Lucerne from one of the tunnel openings. From here, you look over Switzerland's vast central plateau, where most of the country's people live.
We descended the other side of the mountain by gondola to Frackegodi, the longest toboggan run in Switzerland. For nearly a mile, you slide down the stainless steel ramp, hanging on for dear life to a brake handle. I was disappointed because the woman in front of me rode very slowly, so I kept catching up to her and having to slow down. So now we have to go back to experience the full thrill of the ride. But we went on next to Bern, the capital of Switzerland, whose entire city center is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Bern was founded in 1191 on the Aar River and is known for its many fountains, sandstone facades, narrow streets, and historic towers. On a personal note, it's also where Doug's uncle was born. Upon arrival at the train station, which is essentially an enormous shopping mall, we exited onto a big square called Bahnhofplatz. We headed for the road called Bärenplatz, named for the bear pits that once filled a ditch here. Bears are the local mascot of Bern. The name Bern itself is derived from the German word for bear. You see bears everywhere in names, flags, and on towers. The tower on the left is called the Dutch Tower, or Hollanderturm, and was originally part of the city wall. At the northern end of the Bärenplatz, we came upon this strange spiral-shaped fountain shown on the right. It is the 1983 creation of Swiss artist Merit Oppenheim. Made of concrete and aluminum, it symbolizes growth and life. What makes it unique are the plants and moss that thrive around the column. At first, many residents didn't like it, but the fountain has survived and is now a tourist draw. On the southern end of the Bärenplatz, at the other end of the road, is the Swiss Parliament building, made of Bern's famous green-gray sandstone. Parliament holds its meetings under the Grand Dome, shown here. Until 2003, Parliament Square was a parking lot. It was then redesigned and is now a lively public square for political demonstrations, food markets, and concerts. The fountain is a popular playground for children. Its 26 jets represent each canton in Switzerland. And on the south side of the Parliament, around the back side, is this commanding view of the Aire River, which is fed by glaciers, and Bern's largest church, the Berner Münster, which we'll talk about in a minute. But right now, our destination was Kramgas Street, which is shown in the left photo. And this was the one-time home of Albert Einstein. This long street is lined with Baroque facades and arcades that are still used by street vendors. We headed to house number 49, shown in the center, the Einstein House, where Albert and Meleva Einstein lived from 1903 to 1905. Their child, Hans Albert, was born here.
The room also contains many of its original furnishings, including the desk that Einstein used while working in the patent office and on his theory of relativity. And here are more items in the house: Einstein's clock, photographs, types, and personal items. Continuing our walking tour, we almost tripped on this unusual piece of street art. Never quite sure what you're going to find in the streets of Bern. Fortunately, we were in Bern on a market day when the streets are lined with vendors selling flowers, baked goods, fruits, vegetables, cheese, meat, and honey, all fresh and local with plenty of samples. The Zeitlog clock tower is a landmark in Bern. Built in the early 13th century, it was a gate in Bern's fortifications. In the 14th century, it was converted into a women's prison, housing women convicted of sexual relations with clerics. And of course, the clerics received no punishment. The tower was damaged during the Great Fire of 1405, and repairs weren't completed until 1983. The astronomical clock dates back to the 16th century and a large clock face to the 17th century. Each hour, the happy jester comes to life. Father Time turns his hourglass, the rooster crows in German, and the golden man rings the bells. This always attracts quite a crowd. Near the clock tower is the Kornhausplatz, which was originally a ditch around the first city wall. After the Great Fire of 1405, this was filled to form a plaza. In the early 18th century, the Kornhaus, which is German for granary, was built on the western side of the plaza. You can see this granary in the left-hand photo behind a fountain. The former granary is below street level. The photo on the right shows the interior, which is now an upscale restaurant and bar. In the left-hand photo, Alison is sitting on the edge of a colorful 16th century fountain called the Child Eater Fountain, or the Kindli Fresserbrunnen. This fountain was created by Hans Ging, who created many of Bern's fountains. As you can see in the enlargement in the center, there is an ogre eating young children. Theories abound, but no one knows why such a macabre theme was chosen.
So after another full day of sightseeing, we headed back to Bärenplatz for dinner, and especially a good Swiss beer. Our balcony seats had a great view of the Parliament. The next day, we headed back to the Berner Münster. Its 330-foot tower is the highest in Switzerland. Construction began in 1421 and took 150 years to complete. But Protestantism arrived before a bishop was installed, and so it is called a Munster instead of a cathedral. The main portal has gold leaf with scenes from the Last Judgment and is a remnant of Catholicism. Its existence shows that the Protestant reformers didn't destroy every decorative detail in their fervor to rid the city of Catholicism. For 5 Swiss francs, you can climb more than 300 steps, which I did, up the spiral staircase to the base of the steeple for magnificent views in all directions. And here is a view looking back along the Aar River and the Parliament. That afternoon, we took a train about 20 miles west of Bern to the medieval town of Morton. It's also called Murat. It's located on a hillside on the shore of Lake Morton. This town is known for its fine medieval ramparts, the best in Switzerland. It has a castle and an old center with an arcaded main street and lots of outdoor cafes and elegant shops. But the photo on the right shows the Bern Gate, so named because it opens onto the road to Bern. The beautiful old clock has reportedly been wound by hand every day since 1712. Cannonballs are still embedded in the outside of the town wall. You don't see a sight like this very often. The balls were shot from cannons during the 1476 Battle of Morton, which resulted in a crushing defeat for the Burgundians at the hands of the Swiss. On the right is a 14th century house, thought to be the oldest house in Morton. After exploring the town, we climbed up to the ramparts. This walk provides terrific views of the town and the surrounding countryside. Descending the stairs, we found this clock that was made in 1816 and was once in the tower of the city hall. In 1991, a town resident found it gathering dust in an attic and decided to reassemble it and bring it back into working order. At street level, we explored some 15th century narrow streets. And with a tinge of guilt, the cat made us think of our own cat back home. Back in the town center, we noticed this distinctive building with a plaque identifying it as the Rutenloch. This building is a late Gothic-style jewel and was slated to be demolished to provide access to the new railway station. Fortunately, funds ran out and the building survived.
The next day, we traveled to Lauterbrunnen, near Interlaken in the Bernese Highlands. We were really getting to the mountains now. Lauterbrunnen Valley is one of the most impressive valleys in the Alps and is known for an incredible 72 waterfalls and its easy access to the Jungfrau and Schilthorn mountains. The weather was overcast when we arrived, so we were not sure we would see the famed vistas from these peaks. We walked through town to the Stobach Hotel, one of the oldest hotels in the valley, and named for the spectacular 900-foot waterfall nearby, the second highest in Switzerland. In the morning, the sky was overcast, so we put off going to the highest peaks and instead took the cog railway to the village of Mürren. This village is perched over a mile high on a shelf of alpine pasture overlooking the Lauterbrunnen Valley. It's a village that dates back to the 13th century, and although alpine sports have taken over in winter, agriculture is still its main activity in the summer. The clouds do not detract from the spectacular views. We enjoyed walking along the main road lined with traditional wood houses in the Swiss chalet style. These houses were built with logs or boards on a rubble foundation. The houses are typically 2.5 stories high with a lower pitched roof to support the snow load. They often have extensive porches and balconies that are decorated with flowers. The homes were mainly used in the summer for keeping animals, the famous cows with bells, for which there were many, but are now year-round residences. We decided to walk rather than take the cable car down to the nearby village of Gimmelwald. The atmospheric clouds and cool temperatures made this a perfect day for a hike. As we walked, we could hear the sound of cowbells. With the views and the bells, we definitely knew we were in Switzerland. And here is one of the cows we passed along the road. We learned that some of their bells weigh as much as 10 pounds. By the time we reached Gimmelwald, it was drizzling and we realized we had made the right choice not to go higher into the mountains. Gimmelwald is much like Mürren, it is also a joy to wander around. The village has been saved for development because of its classification as an avalanche zone. It has one zigzag street lined with traditional Swiss houses with a few tourist shops. Since it was raining, we decided to return to Lauterbrunnen and visit the famed Trummelbach Falls.
This falls is a series of 10 cascades that cut deep into a valley wall. The falls drain the mighty glaciers of the Eiger, Monk, and Jungfrau. And here are more pictures of the falls. It really was magnificent. And one more.
And also the roar of falling water was almost deafening.
It was absolutely almost deafening. The next day, we decided that regardless of the weather, we were going into the mountains. So we wanted to go to the 10,000-foot Schilthorn. Cable cars like the one shown on the right took us past Gimmelwald and Mürren to the summit. And this is what we saw. It was completely socked in. So we headed into the nearby Piz Gloria station with its 360-degree revolving restaurant. This is actually an image from the internet because we were socked in. We ordered hot chocolates and took window seats. As the restaurant slowly turned, we saw that the sky was clearing. It was like a curtain lifting, much more exciting than a clear day. And it continued to clear. It's quite magnificent. There's an interesting story behind the Piz Gloria station. From October 1968 to May 1969, the Schilthorn was the filming location for James Bond's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The revolving restaurant, which you can see here, served as the headquarters of Bond's arch nemesis, Blofeld, and was called Piz Gloria, a name it has kept to the present day. On the right are the stars Diana Rigg and George Lazenby, who played Bond. I think I pronounced his name wrong.
Lazenby.
Lazenby, sorry about that. Downstairs led to the Bond World 007 interactive exhibit that takes you behind the scenes of the movie. You can step into the role of James Bond and fly a helicopter to Piz Gloria or bobsled down the Alps in a simulator. Here's the helicopter that you can ride. Back outside, we could now view the real attraction. From left to right are the three 13,000-foot peaks, the Eiger, the Monk, and the Jungfrau. Although all are popular climbing destinations, the Eiger on the left, its north-facing 6,000-foot wall of crumbling limestone is considered Europe's greatest challenge. But for us, a big challenge was navigating the 600-foot thrill walk at Bern, just below the Schilthorn. Fortunately, it was in mist, so that the drop of several thousand feet beneath the walkway was slightly less terrifying. We returned by cable car to Lauterbrunnen and took another train to Wengen and a gondola to Melecken. This time, for a few extra francs, we actually rode on the top of the gondola. That was quite thrilling and as close to paragliding as I ever hoped to come. At the top, we hiked the Royal Walk and took in the breathtaking views. In the distance, you can see that I decided to check out the view from another perspective. There I am on my head. And from here, you can look down into the adjacent Grindelwald Valley, not to be mistaken with Grimmelwald.
The next morning, we took a 3-hour train ride from Lauterbrunnen to Zermatt on the Italian border. Zermatt is usually very crowded and is perhaps the most touristy spot in Switzerland. But in October, it wasn't too bad. We found the climate fairly mild, besides being wet occasionally, and mostly in the 40s and 50s. Despite many new ski chalets and apartments, the center of town has a nice historical district. These buildings were used for storing grain. The round flat stones at the base of the building, shown here at the upper right, prevented rats from getting inside. Our main destinations in Zermatt were Gornergrat and the Klein or Little Matterhorn, also called the Glacier Paradise, which is what we're going to refer to. You can see the train line to Gornergrat in yellow on the left, and the gondola route to Glacier Paradise in the center in red. And the Matterhorn is easily visible on the right. We took the 1896 cog railway to Gornergrat. At an altitude of 10,000 feet, this is the second highest railway in Europe after the Jungfrau. The Gornergrat is surrounded by 29 peaks above 13,000 feet, and the Gorner Glacier is the second longest glacier in the Alps. And here we are on the viewing platform at Gornergrat. From here, it looks like you can almost touch the Matterhorn. And here was our view of Gornergrat Station from the highest viewing platform. And the impressive, but unfortunately shrinking Gorner Glacier. We hiked what was called the Sunshine Trail from Gornergrat to Riftenberg. This trail, which takes about an hour and follows the cog railway tracks, gives a continuous view of the Matterhorn and dozens of other 13,000 peaks. And of course, we had to take the iconic view of the Matterhorn reflected in Riffelsee Lake. And Alison couldn't resist a handstand.
That's a headstand.
Before leaving Zermatt, we visited the Mountaineer Cemetery located behind St. Marissa's Church. Today, about 15 climbers a year lose their lives on the Matterhorn, and surprisingly, about 1,200 people need to be rescued. Most lives are lost through falls on the descent. The cemetery is a solemn place with too many young people. The nearby Matterhorn Museum, the top of which is this odd glass building, is shown here. It features traditional life in mountain villages and a history of climbing. Although modest from the outside, most of the exhibits are at a lower level and are in the form of a mountain village with 14 buildings, a church, hotel, huts, and granaries. This shows some of the items in the first ascent of the Matterhorn, which took place on July 14th, 1865. This ascent was made by 6 climbers led by British climber Edward Whymper. Tragically, 4 were killed on the descent when one of the men slipped and pulled the other 3 with him down the north face. Whymper and 1 other man survived, but they were accused of having cut the rope that's shown here in the upper part of the slide to ensure that they were not dragged down with the others. Also shown here are some of Whymper's boots and ice pick.
From Zermatt, it takes 50 minutes to reach the summit of the Klein Matterhorn, which is also known as the Matterhorn Glacier Paradise. Klein Matterhorn means small Matterhorn. At nearly 13,000 feet, this is the highest summit station in Europe. On the observation deck are displays of mountains you can see in all directions. Here's a great view of the nearby Breithorn that lies on the border between Switzerland and Italy. To the south, we could see all the way to Mont Blanc, the highest peak in Europe. This cross at the summit is engraved with the message, "Be more human," in 4 languages. We really weren't quite sure what that meant. Here's another view of the Breithorn. On our ride to the mountain summit, we rode with 2 Asian women who were dressed totally inappropriately for this trip. They were highly made up and appeared to be fashion models, but it was their high heels that really caught our attention. It was amusing watching them carefully navigating the metal grill on the viewing platform. Oh, and here is our view of the Zermatt Valley from that platform. Very spectacular. And we had this marvelous view of the vast snowfield that feeds the Gorner Glacier. Look into the far distance of this photo, and you can see the Cervino ski lift station in Italy. If you look carefully, you can see skiers coming down the slope towards us. I could have stood here for hours just staring at the site. After the amazing views outside, we went into a tunnel carved 50 feet below the glacier surface. Here are some of the ice sculptures that were displayed inside. There were also some crevasses. The next morning, it was time to move on to Montreux on the eastern end of Lake Geneva. Our train, called the Golden Pass Express, followed a long valley filled with vineyards on both sides. It was noticeably warmer because we dropped several thousand feet in elevation. In fact, this area is said to have a Mediterranean microclimate.
Our main reason for visiting Montreux was to see this most visited castle in Switzerland, the 800-year-old Chateau de Chillon. This fortified residence is built around a central courtyard and has many towers and halls filled with period furniture and artwork. Over the centuries, it has been used as a warehouse, armory, prison, hospital, and is now a major tourist attraction. In June of 1816, the poets Lord Byron and Percy Shelley visited the chateau while sailing on Lake Geneva. There, Byron learned about Francois Bonivard, a monk from Geneva shown here. From 1530 to 1536, Bonivard was chained to a pillar in this room. Byron wrote a poem called, quote, "The Prisoner of Chillon," unquote, which made the chateau famous. You can still see where Byron carved his name in one of the pillars. As you can see on the left, the dungeon's vaulted roof has some intact wooden planks after 8 centuries, which is unusual. The photo on the right shows the water gate through which the castle's lord escaped in 1536. When the Bernese army invaded, he jumped into a waiting boat. One of the castle rooms held this collection of medieval wooden chests that nobles used when they traveled to the country to collect taxes and check on residents. We returned to our hotel and relaxed on the terrace overlooking Lake Geneva. We sipped glasses of local white wine and ate Gruyere cheese and chocolate from the Lindt factory in Zurich. It was a perfectly balanced meal.
Absolutely.
After a rest, we strolled along the lake shore to the statue of Freddie Mercury, who was often in Montreux. We hadn't known this before, so it's quite a surprise running into this. Freddie was born Farouk Bulsara on the East African island of Zanzibar, and as everybody knows, became the lead singer for the rock group Queen. The band bought a recording studio beside the lake in 1978, and Montreux became a second home for Freddie. The statue was unveiled in 1996. Every first weekend in September, the city celebrates Freddie Mercury Montreux Memorial Day. We then took a side trip to Chaplin's World in the nearby town of Vevey. In 1952, at the age of 63, Charlie Chaplin, his wife Una, and 8 children moved into a 10-acre estate in this exclusive lakeside town. This slide shows the front and back of the estate. And here are the sumptuous dining and living rooms on the first floor. The mansion now has many lifelike figures and visual tricks scattered throughout. For example, in one of the bathrooms, as shown here, Albert Einstein is looking into the mirror. However, when you stand beside him, strangely, you don't see your own reflection. In Una's bedroom, shown on the right, you can stand beside Charlie and Una and watch home movies together. And they made quite a few of them during their time there. And you can even get a haircut from Chaplin himself.
There are dozens of exhibits on Chaplin's career as the little tramp in the silent film era as well as his roles in talkies like Modern Times and The Great Dictator. Just down the road, you can find Una and Charlie's graves in a small, out-of-the-way cemetery. We were surprised to find that their friend, the actor James Mason, is also buried here. To end the day, we rode this funicular to the top of Mount Pelerin, where we sat in a restaurant, a very elegant restaurant, and had a glass of champagne of wine overlooking Lake Geneva with the Alps beyond. The next day, we took a train along the northern shore of the lake to Geneva, where it finally really rained. It was still raining heavily the next day as we boarded a flight to Bristol, England, to be with our grandson on his first birthday. And here is little Arthur. A wonderful end to a perfect trip. Yes, he's very cute.
So thank you very much.
If you have any questions, we can address them.
So folks, let's give Doug and Alison a big virtual round of applause for a great presentation. If anyone has any comments, please type them into the chat. If you have any questions, type them into the Q&A, and we'll take roughly 15 minutes of audience questions and comments. Lee says, great program. What month were you there? I was there, but there was a ton of snow, so perhaps global warming. So Lee wants to know when you were there.
October 2023. So just this past October. And yeah, there wasn't a huge amount of snow, huge snow fields, but the Matterhorn was remarkably free of snow.
Kathy wants you to know that Arthur is adorable. Lynn says, thanks for the amazing presentation. Linda says it was wonderful and it brought back many memories to her. Lori is giving you a round of applause. Beatrice says, incredible trip. Barbara says, great presentation. Maury says, amazing. Thanks for sharing your journey. Mary says, interesting. Patricia says, enjoyable. Stephanie says, wonderful. Katie says, it was a lot of fun to hear about your trip. Ivy would like to know, how cold was it on the summit?
It was cool. I wouldn't say it was cold. There was a bit of a breeze at times, but we did not take heavy clothing with us. We did the layered approach, and frankly, I was never really that cold.
Right. So the sun was shining, so we were fairly warm, even though the air temperature was below freezing. Wasn't much melting going on at 13,000 feet.
Yeah, the solar radiation is really amazing when you're in the high mountains. You get very warm, even if it's chilly outside.
And we didn't have much wind, thankfully.
Joan says, thanks. This was great. Glad you had a good time. Carolyn and Marie both say wonderful. Beatrice says your grandson's beautiful. Laura says, thank you. I was there years ago, and this was a great reminder of a great trip. Frank says, bravo. Louise says, we lived in Switzerland for 4 years a long time ago. We had young children, so we didn't see many of the things you showed us here. She says it was lovely, and she thanks you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Judy says, great pictures, great stories, great presentation. Thank you both. Marianne says, I definitely want to visit. She asks, can you get around Switzerland with just speaking English?
Absolutely. Not a problem. I do speak French, and I spoke some just for the fun of it, but frankly, I didn't need to. And, German was not required.
And we can recommend Switzerland more highly as a wonderful vacation spot. The country is beautiful. The trains are fast and quiet and on time, and the people are very friendly.
Patty says, thanks for sharing. I especially enjoyed seeing the waterfalls and hearing you talk about how deafening the sound was. Mariette says, beautiful photos. Virginia, totally enjoyed your presentation. Sagat says, great trip and wonderful presentation. Elaine says, excellent. Laura says, really enjoyed it all. And plus the photo of your new grandson. Diana says, this was terrific. Beatrice says, a part of the world I never thought to visit. Rebecca notes that she skied down from Peas in my, that might be a misspelling somewhere, in my younger days. She used to ski, I guess in Switzerland. Let me jump over to, okay, let me keep going. Actually, there's a few more. I think you mentioned the altitude. So was the altitude a problem on the mountains? Joan wants to know.
You know, I was really surprised. I didn't feel any effects of the altitude. We walked about 5 miles a day while we were in the mountains, and I really did not feel the effects of the altitude. Did you, Doug?
No, I didn't, not really.
Diana says, oh, go ahead.
About the time we might have gotten acclimated. Because you gain a lot of elevation going from Bern to Lauterbrunnen, go up thousands of feet. So after a few days, I think it's you're more used to it.
Diana says, terrific presentation. Karen says, how did you determine your itinerary? What other stops would you have made if you had more time?
Well, it was difficult because in looking at in planning it, there were so many itineraries to choose from, and different people, would recommend various itineraries. We actually went with Rick Steves. That was we had to settle on an itinerary, and Rick Steves really had the best one. We tweaked it a fair amount, but we picked the major cities we wanted to see, the major sites. If we'd had more time, we would have maybe seen the southwest of the country, maybe the Jura Mountains and the northeast. But given our time, which was 2 weeks in Switzerland, we hit as many spots as we saw were highlighted in descriptions of the country.
We generally tried to stay about at least 2 days in each of the major cities. That allowed time to get oriented, to maybe take a morning city tour or walking tour, and then to go to the more I guess the other sites like museums, art galleries, and then gondola rides.
Kathy, oh, and by the way, a couple people mentioned Rick Steves in the chat. I think they're using that as well when they go. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, Doug. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, go ahead.
All right, trying to get through everything here. We'll see how we do. So Kathy asks about transportation. Did you ever need to use something other than the train and the tram, like a car? And how easy was the train system to use?
The train system is dead easy, very efficient, on time, no problem with the trains. We did cable cars, we did gondolas, we did I think we did a couple of buses.
Yeah.
We've found out the buses, at least when we were there, all the buses were free. We didn't know that before we went there. We had heard how expensive it was in Switzerland, but we actually did not find it to be that bad. With the Swiss travel pass and then eating food in the co-ops rather than going to restaurants all the time, we found that it was quite affordable. No need for a car as far as we were concerned.
So clean and on time. So think of the MBTA and then think of the opposite. That's what
think of what the MBTA should be.
Right. Yes, what the MBTA should be. Yes, yeah. Kathy asks, what is the name of the hotel near the church where the bell rings every 15 minutes? That's definitely one to avoid.
Oh, that was the Schlussel Hotel. Schlussel. The one that's 500 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was extremely annoying.
Right.
Yes. Larry asks, do the French-speaking Swiss think of them as Swiss or French? So, do they think of themselves as Swiss or French?
Swiss, I would say Swiss. People are very proud of being Swiss all throughout Switzerland.
Ivy asks, did you have any great chocolate while you were there?
Well, we went to the factory. And yes, we actually, we put about 3 pounds in our bags because you can take any amount you want as samples. And so we were generous with that. And we would kind of ration this chocolate throughout the rest of our trip. So we had chocolate all the way through to the end of our trip from that one visit to the chocolate factory. And, because Lindt chocolate really is it is top quality.
Right.
So it lived up to the hype. It
What's
lived up
that?
to the hype. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yes, especially the small round balls that you can easily buy here in America that are actually, I think, made in New Hampshire, in Strathmore, New Hampshire, or Stratham. But they were the easiest way to carry from day to day, and we certainly went through them pretty rapidly.
You just throw some in your backpack and off you go.
Right. And they have about, I think, 10 to 15 different varieties.
Oh, yeah.
But Bettina says, thank you. Your presentation brought back memories from some of the cities you visited. My mother was born in Switzerland, so it is close to my heart. Karen wants to know, does Switzerland accept U.S. currency?
No, you need to change your money. We actually didn't use cash at all. We just used credit cards.
Right. The main currency are Swiss francs.
Yeah.
They're separate
So-
from euro.
So Doug and Alison, if you are following along, I'm now jumping into the Q&A, and we have already answered some of these questions, but let me see which ones we haven't. Michelle asks, were the cog railways scary?
No. I didn't find them so. They are steep.
Diane asks, do you know why the bells at the church rung every 15 minutes? Why would residents put up with that?
Tradition. It was something which they had done for so long and continue to do so. And I have no clue why residents don't complain, because I certainly would.
Cindy, yep, so we said Rick Steves was the travel book we used. Anonymous attendee says, good job in pronouncing the French names. Let's see here. Michelle asks, do you need reservations for the train station from Zurich to Lucerne?
This is the cool thing with the Swiss Travel Pass. You don't need reservations on anything. You just get on whatever train you want. I think we visited a ticket station once, but you don't have to even go to the ticket station. You just get on the train and show the conductor your Swiss pass, and they just look at it and they say, okay, stamp, and they go.
You may need them in the summer when it's a lot more crowded, but in October, it was much lighter in terms of traffic. And the trains are so much more frequent, about every half hour, leaving from Zurich to Lucerne.
And just to confirm, Donnie asks, were the short trains included in your Swiss rail pass?
Not only the short trains and all the gondolas and cog railways, but museums also. There are many discounts with Swiss Travel Pass. We found it to be a really good value.
Yeah, good bargain.
Michelle asks, how much walking did you do on average each day?
I think about 5 miles. So we actually walked throughout all 3 cities extensively. And then when we got into the mountains, we walked at least 5 miles. We would choose, short hikes. And we didn't actually show a lot of those hikes that we took. But it's a wonderful place to take a 5-mile hike.
So you said you found it not as expensive as you heard in terms of traveling around there. An anonymous attendee asks, do you recommend carrying cash?
No.
No, it wasn't necessary.
You might want it as a possible backup. We never needed it. And in fact, I don't think we even had any Swiss francs. We just used credit cards. We have one credit card and one backup card. And that was fine.
Alison, is tipping in restaurants expected?
No.
Beatrice wants to know, how much was that rail pass, and did you purchase it when you arrived in Switzerland, asks Ivy.
Well, you can buy it before you get to Switzerland.
That's what we did.
But what we did, I think it was about $350 per person.
360, yeah.
360, around there.
There's also a senior discount, but it has about $360 for 10 days. You can choose the number of days, and it's unlimited travel for those days. It's actually consecutive days. Like we're going to France and we're getting a train pass there, but that's not consecutive days. It's just like 10 random days. This is consecutive. So you have to make sure you're going to be using the the train ticket, train pass
After-
consecutively.
After we got to the main train station in Zurich, they, took our information off the internet and printed out, certificates that we could take with us. They even laminated them, so we just carried them around and showed them when necessary.
That's true. You're having it printed out, hard copy, that's the best thing.
And also showing it to conductors rather than having to use your phone all the time.
Yeah, we didn't have to keep searching for it on our phone because that can get very awkward if you don't have a connection, internet connection. So we just printed it out, and we had it in a little package.
The QR code.
And yeah.
All right, so we've got about 5 more minutes left. We'll take a few more questions. Donnie says, wonderful, informative presentation. Thank you. A lot of people asking about the Lindt chocolate. Anonymous attendee asks, did you notice the difference in Lindt chocolates that are available in the US compared to Switzerland?
I'd say they're fresher because we got them, it was like made right then. And you really can tell the difference. There's no chalkiness, it just tastes fresh and creamy.
An anonymous attendee asks, did you see any poverty in Switzerland while you were there?
Not really.
No.
An anonymous attendee says, we found Rick Steves to be pretty good for itinerary compared to, say, Fodor's in terms of thoroughness and must-see classification. So another vote for Rick Steves. Joan wants to know, when exactly in October did you visit? Do you remember the dates?
About the 6th of October and came back about the 25th, 27th.
We were there 2 weeks.
Yes, but we did the 3 weeks, we did 1 week in England. So it was about the 6th to the 27th, the entire trip.
Jean wants to know a little bit more about your dinner meals and any food highlights you had over your vacation.
Yeah, I mean, we did eat dinner in a couple of restaurants and had some of the traditional Swiss food, and that was great. I guess we didn't think of taking pictures of them, of our meals at the time. But, honestly, we did go to the co-op quite a bit because they have fresh sandwiches, they have fresh salads. The food is actually quite good. You can get a nice bottle of wine and, some Gruyere cheese and all kinds of cheeses. And fruits, everything's fresh. So we did not go to many restaurants,
right.
and saved a lot of money
right.
doing that.
And most of our hotels we chose had breakfast in the morning. So
and they were good.
That took care of that.
Good breakfasts. Right. Yeah, bed and breakfasts are the way to go.
Ivy asks, is the Charlie Chaplin House an admission or is it open to the public?
I mean, you pay, I can't remember the entry fee.
About 20, I think, Swiss francs.
20 Swiss francs, and a Swiss franc is worth what?
A little over $1.
Okay, so it's about $20.
Yeah.
It's well worth it. It's a very big museum. It's got great exhibits, and it's in a beautiful location overlooking Lake Geneva.
And we learned so much about Charlie's life and the family and his wonderful career as first as a silent film artist and then in the talkies later on.
Let's see. Lori says, wonderful presentation. Frank says, absolutely fantastic, stunning, information-packed presentation. We'd love to see an encore presentation about some of your hikes. So as we approach 1:45, I think we will wrap it there. Doug and Alison, do you have any last words for the audience before we end the session?
Just try to go and have a great time. It's a wonderful country.
Yeah, thanks for your attention and thanks for your enthusiastic response.
Yeah, we had about 275 at our peak. Great attendance for a daytime program. Thank you all so much for joining us. Look for an email from me tomorrow with a link to the recording, a link to a feedback survey, and information about some other upcoming virtual programs, including some armchair travel. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks again, Doug and Alison. Have a good one.
Yeah, thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.